like to welcome you. Thank you, Mom. And this is Sandra. Her name is Sandra Johnson. I really appreciate you being here. I know you're writing an autobiography.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you, because the subject or the information in the autobiography is interesting. What is your autobiography? I can't even say the word autobiography about.
Okay, I wrote an autobiography about my life, but it's also a family book with family stories, family contributions. And it's also, it takes me from being, coming from the segregated Black South all the way through my life and up to today with a different type of racism, like the new Jim Crow. So I came from the old Jim Crow. Okay. And so I wanted to share and leave my life story with my family. So the book, sometimes we have some names, a lot of names and relationships that the audience may get a little bored with, but I still kept it in there because I want the newer generations and people to be able to read and see what it meant to come from the Black South, segregated South.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1943.
Okay. All right. And why was it important for you to write this autobiography?
Well, it was important for me because I felt like it was something I needed to say, get off of all these years. It's just things I wanted to say. But it was important for me to leave to this new generation and to my family because I discussed issues of sexism and racism, classism, ageism, but also colorism within our race. And I touched some subjects that has happened within our family, domestic violence and sexual assaults. So I wanted my family to have this knowledge, or anyone else, who would be interested in reading it. Okay. So I shared it through my experience.
It sounds like some deep stuff.
For me it is.
Yes.
But I really wanted the kids to realize that they have to maintain being activists also, that we're at a different time. And there's an illusion that everything is just fine. We walk out the door, our children today, they walk out, they see the Michael Jordans and the Oprah Winfreys, and they see the individual successes, but they don't see the problems that still exist, and that's the inner city problems, that's the problems with the mass incarceration, the disparity of economics, between the race. So these are things.
You mentioned colorism.
Yes.
What is that?
Colorism is where we discriminate within our own race. Light skin versus dark skin, light skin being preferable, and we still have that problem today. We had it when I was coming up. And people would look at your fingernail tips and your ears to see how dark you would become. And that child, would be. So these are issues that we need to resolve within our race, and we need to stop talking about light skin being beauty versus dark skin not, or good hair versus bad hair. And these are awareness that we need to start taking care of within our own family. So I deliberately talked about that because I want our family and anyone who else will read that to have a different conscious level today. It hasn't stopped even at my age.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because you're fair complected, and generally you might think that someone who's darker skinned would say, oh, we need to stop this within the race because history has shown that the lighter skin have more benefits. So why does it matter to you as a lighter skinned?
Because it's about whether it's racism, sexism, classism, we all should be concerned. Coming from the segregated Black South, I came up in an all-black area, all-black school. And they knew what I was. I was born in the same neighborhoods. My two families, one daddy's side looking light and white skin like me, mom's side, which are light brown and dark skin. So I have both families that I love dearly, you know. And but coming from the Black South, I knew exactly, they knew who I was. So it was a positive actual experience. Some blacks may say they didn't, but for me, I had a very positive experience. My problem that I focus on through life is when people think I'm white. That can be good, that can be bad, depending on my situation. Which was a problem when I left Little Rock and moved to the big cities. That was one of the themes that followed me throughout my life.
How do you see black people representing themselves to the world today versus during the time when you were growing up?
Well, I came up in the harsh Jim Crow. But I also, that's the negative part, but the positive part is also we had, the black families were intact. I was in a very strong black community, even though we were segregated unequally. We didn't have the education or the tools the white schools had. But we had very strong and dedicated black teachers. And our community was a mixture of working class. You had some professionals. I had two of my teachers that lived up the street from my house. And then you had like my daddy was a brick mason contractor. So it was very strong.
Strong, committed, educated teachers, what about them?
Oh, their message was always, they were dedicated, and you always felt like, first of all, they were our mentors, and they were very strong, committed, dedicated teachers. Before we could graduate from the black high school, we had to have what they called then Negro history, and it wasn't a prerequisite. It wasn't a choice.
Negro history.
They call it Negro history. So. It was a prerequisite, what I'm saying. It was mandatory. You had to have that to graduate. But what that did a lot for our culture, knowing our culture. It did a lot for our identity. It did a lot. This was before even Malcolm X, Dr. King were big. They had to have this for the blacks, for they call it Negro history. Today, and when I moved from there, I remember moving to California. And I moved to this area that was white. And before long, what happened is when blacks moved in, the whites moved out, white flight. Once they moved out, then the resources came out with it. Now you're looking at the educational resources went down. You're talking about a lack of crime going up now, because once you take all the resources out of these neighborhoods. So I ended up, what I'm trying to say, in an inner city home now, living in the inner city neighborhood, where mom's house didn't have the value anymore. So we started developing a whole different inner city that was different from where I came from.
And what was
different? The high crime.
There wasn't high crime.
No.
Even though it was completely black,
Right, we had crime. I don't mean we didn't, but it wasn't at the level that it is now. We had but we had a community.
So why do you think that is?
Because I think that they have, I think blacks ran from the South, from the harsh violence, and like many of our family members, but then when they got up to the big cities, they ran into a different type of racism. And the type of racism that they were still having problems economically. They didn't have the strong neighborhoods anymore that we had. They were stripped of education. They took the resources out. So these areas that are left now, these kids, a lot of times don't feel like they have hope. They are isolated in some of these some of the high crime areas.
So why were they leaving the South? Because
of the violence and the harsh
violence
of blacks men victims of the harsh, violence. So years ago, and they would go to the
Violence of inner between each other?
no, the violence from whites as
see.
perpetrators.
Got it.
Right. And lynchings. I mean, you had all kinds. We had family members who left, and that's the thing. I think we had a school, and again, I'm not advocating that we have to be segregated, and I'm not against integration. I don't mean that, but there was something we lost,
Right.
and we lost our family. We lost the community. The strong family, and it's unfortunate when we say we're in, there's no more racism because we had a black president. All you have to do is look at the educational system. One, in our communities, there is such a poor quality of education in the community of black and brown people. And but when you know your education about your history, that has a lot to do with your esteem, with your self-worth, and has a lot to do with not only just us. American history, period, needs to incorporate women's history, black and brown, and our history is left out. But when it is put in, it's very selective, because Malcolm X would not be a person that they would necessarily want in the history books. For us, we would, but they select blacks many times who don't speak out very in a strong manner, So many times when they do talk about Dr. King had to fight. They had to fight for him to get a holiday, but yet Columbus has been. Who was a man that was everything negative you could think about, but this has been a day that they still celebrate today.
Well, he wasn't taught as a negative person in
Right.
school.
We right, even though he brought diseases, even though this man was a horrible, person, but they still celebrate him today. Mm-hmm. They have Columbus Day sales still today, and we still go to these stores and we encourage that. But all we remember in history mostly is Dr. King, Malcolm X, and slavery. Mm-hmm. Those are about the three things that we all know.
That's true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that you actually answered how you see black people representing themselves in the world today versus more specifically.
The way I see young kids doing their part. I do see that, Black Lives Matter. I see a lot of kids doing things, but the way I do see today, I don't see that energy there. I see more complacency. Mm-hmm. Today, I see more people with more feelings of apathy, and that's kind of the way I see the difference. But I think what I was saying about an illusion of everything being okay, you got more interracial couples, you got people integrating in the churches, you have all kind of, the things are doing fine. We knew we couldn't walk through that front door. We knew we had to go to a colored water fountain. So that's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. If they don't, and that's where denial can come in among the American whites, because these things don't seem as obvious or blatant, even though they are. You're talking about mass incarceration. You're talking about problems with the police, system. You're talking about lack of quality education. They don't have those teachers we had. Mm-hmm. So even though we still needed to fight for desegregation, I'm not taking that away. But on the other hand, we weren't aware of when the integration, you had the good black teachers that went to these schools, people were spread out, and you lost that. Mm-hmm. Now, if we had integration with equality, then that would have been a different story. But we didn't have it. So we integrated, but we still had the racism, but now we don't have our teachers, and we don't have the
The
black
structure,
community and the structure of that
community.
black family.
Mhm.
So the way I see the kids today, they not walking through. Some of them are not even aware. They know what they are feeling, but they aren't aware. But see, we knew when we walked through that black door, we went through the back door. We had to walk through the back door. We knew we had to go to the colored water fountain, to the colored restroom. It was in our face all the time, and it was very obvious. So when it's not so obvious, it can make people feel very, hopeless, helpless, like in our communities. And also for white American, it can perpetuate a denial. We don't see, everything's fine, you got a black president.
Interesting.
You know.
That's an interesting
Mhm.
perspective. When you were growing up, did you imagine that black people would be where they are today? As far as having a black president, black people in commercials, the wealth that certain black people
No.
have, and where or how do you see black people in the future?
I tell you, you never could have told me I'd see a black president back, because I went to, after the Little Rock 9, went to Central High School. They closed the school for a year, called the lost year. Then I went to Central High. The attacks were brutal and hostile. I never would have thought that we'd ever see a black president. I mean, I'm just coming from the colored water fountains and the colored restrooms, and then I go and, So I see there has been a lot of individual successes, and which is also used for why there's no more racism. But we've always had individual successes. Don't
It's
forget,
interesting that you call it individual successes.
because as a mass group, you got to look at the masses to know if you've reached that mountaintop. And the masses, we still are economically behind. We're still behind educationally, and we're still isolated. There's resegregation of the schools, of the communities, So where I see us in the future is going individually being successful unless we can start putting back into these communities. And what I mean by that, whether it's on an individual basis, it's going to take everyone and on every level, I think, to get us back in the future.
Okay. So and that's a difficult subject. And it's difficult to speak about this topic because so many people get offended, there's a lot of lack of knowledge, misunderstandings, and not enough people just listening to understand, listening to relate. And so it's difficult. It's difficult because no one wants to take the blame. No one wants to blame anyone. It's difficult when you're talking about individual successes and people coming together, uniting. I know in history for black people, with black people uniting, there's always something, whether it's integration or drugs or violence, killings, whatever, that stopped that. That's the part, just even getting to the point to where we can, where people can unite. I think the biggest thing is it not just being black people uniting, but all races uniting to have an equal, footing in the world. But do you see that ever being the case?
Well, I think it's important. I think with us, you had two schools, the real conservative and the real liberal, you know what I'm saying? The conservative says don't do any, thing. It's personal responsibility. They got to help themselves. But these communities have been being destructive for years, Then you got the liberal, just give them everything and we don't have to, and that'll help them to come up to where we, see they should be. But I think it takes both worlds. I think there's a personal responsibility, and I think we also need assistance from the all level of
A balance.
Yes, we need a balance. And so what I find people, is there's a real balance of being, say, everything's not about race. Everything's not sexism, racism, classism. There's a personal responsibility of taking care of your kids, of doing certain things. But then there's also the government. We spend more money on wars. We spend millions and millions on campaigns. We spend all these millions on prisons as opposed to education in these communities, jobs, apprenticeships, maybe having the community with when they come out. Prevention is what I'm trying to say. Prevention is more important than it is after the fact. You build a prison, but why not prevention to keep these kids off the street before they get there?
Right.
Because once it becomes their culture, it's hard to turn those children around. So we got to figure out how to stabilize it. So we need the help. We need activists, and we need our own dialogue in our own families. We need to, start the churches. They're real big in the communities. They need to take up a lot of, with power comes responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
We need to address women's issues in our community. We need to address these things and assaults, and we need to not push them under the rug.
And just speaking to you right now, that's why I like actually interviewing, people in the community, because there seems to be, not that they're so simple that it can just be done just like that.
Right.
But
it's a complex.
But it's still, they're solutions. They're beginning of solutions, where it's just sort of like, the politicians that are out there today, it's just, left and right. It's either this or that, like how you were saying.
Right.
And where it just seems like, just coming together and coming with a balance of things. And why isn't there so much energy put on coming up with a balance rather than a fight of, we're right, you're wrong.
And for me, that's how I live. Balance is my choice. I always say I want to be able. I don't want to go from no one control to the other. I want to be a free thinker, and I think that's what we want to be. But at the same time, I think we have to start somewhere. We cannot continue to wait on a miracle or a leader. We have to start within ourselves. What you're doing now, what you do with your children, what you do within your neighborhood, within your family.
Absolutely.
We need to start in the churches.
Self-work,
right.
and then
in the
branching out into
churches
community.
and in the community organization. And you do have people who don't have names, that we don't know their names, who are doing a lot of good work out there, who are activists. My cousin, Stacy, who brought back into the inner city, inner community to help. And then you got people who stay in some of the schools who could move other places. So you have people doing a lot of good work, but we don't know their names, But we all have a responsibility. But the government also has a responsibility
And
too.
then, like you said, even with these individual people who do good work, they're individuals. And it's like, sometimes it's hard to find that unity in where people come together and do it together.
Right. And for this nation to grow, we need, like I think you alluded to the fact that we need everybody to, while we're fighting down here, that's how you end up with the administration that you have. You have everybody fighting down here with the bigotry. All you have to do is say homosexuality, and there's, people will vote for whoever's against, not thinking about what all you may be giving up.
And the politicians know too what to say.
Well,
to get into office, it's like, oh well, I'm gonna say.
Well, they know how to push buttons, and they know that when all you have to do is talk about abortions, homosexuality, and Christianity, to a point that, man, people just totally vote emotionally.
Yeah.
Not understanding that these same politicians use that. They have to depend on us to fight amongst ourselves. They depend on us to be not knowledgeable, and they are emotional about topics. So while we're down here fighting, all of each other, you got sexism, racism, classism, politicians are taking advantage of that. And they are very good salespeople. They're very good psychologists.
And that's the key, what you said, knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable.
Right, right.
Be in the know.
In the know. And this is not by hate and violence.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about real power, you're talking about black, brown women, entrepreneurs. You're talking about within ourselves dealing with coming together, and fighting against sexism and assaults within the family. And too many times we have let that go. We haven't talked enough about that within the community.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
That's a whole different subject.
Next question. What do you believe black people ought to be careful of and watchful for today?
My first thought is always education. Black people need to, we want the right kind of education, to make sure we understand education.
What's
we need the right kind is understanding our own history and where we came from. We're not just all slaves. We've been enslaved, but we need to understand. I think that does a lot for the esteem of people and their character. I think we need to watch, but we do need to be careful of everything being about racism too. We need to be able to have ownership of some of the things and barriers in our own lives that we can get through. I think that we need to watch out for, we are star-struck in this country, and it doesn't matter whether I see stars many times coming in as leaders and influencing, the black community. We need to understand what it means to be free thinkers, to analytical thinkers, critical thinkers. And just because we have someone come in and tell us, don't vote, Hillary is just as bad, we need to learn to critique these messages. Yeah. And we get a lot of negative messages, not only from the stars, but politicians who you don't do your homework on them. All they got to do is hold the little black baby and you say, oh, they okay.
You mentioned the whole Hillary thing. And, I just find that people spend so much energy on just picking out the bad things about people and just the negative and, pointing out. Put that energy into something positive, and even in just doing research, people just kind of come up and say the same things just because that person said it. Oh, that person said Hillary's this, so I'm going to say Hillary's that.
And that's how we put in a very vile and inadequate administration also. I've heard some stars say, don't vote at all. Well, this was to me, a very serious and dangerous by not voting. And of course, in my time, people fought to vote. So voting is very important for me.
For you.
And especially at 74, almost 75 years old, these are things we fought for. And these are pitfalls.
And you're looking good, by the way.
Well, thank you. I feel good. But I am at a point in my life, I know people going, I really don't care at this age. What I mean that, not in a negative way, but I feel like I'm still not too old where I can't learn and be open. But at the same time, I'm not a politician. I'm not too old to be trying to be popular and looking good out there. So I'm just saying, I'm not famous. So what I say is from my experience in my heart. I'm not worried about whether I get a vote. I'm not worried about, that. It's important for me, for the generations that I see, for my family, and for others who will listen, to become, to be able to say and express themselves, to have a clear way of clarity of thinking about your own future and where I see us going in the future. If we don't all, and it doesn't matter whatever injustice we see, we need to all stay very mindful, and we need to all consider ourselves as activists. We need to continue to educate ourselves and our families, and we need to stay involved. And I see us, if we don't, what we will see is a trend of individuals that will be used. Y'all not having a problem because this person, there's Oprah, there's this and that. We as black folks, what we do, we get an emergency emotional surge, you know. Well, boy, I got mad about that. And we get out here, boy, we vote, we do this and we that. But the problem is you need to stay involved, not just in a crisis. You need to do your homework. You need to understand what's, you know, out there for you. And we need to continue at all times. Because when you continue to go to the back of that bus, that was a reminder. I got a problem here. When you and you continue to go to the water fountain, see, and so when it's there, but they have to stay involved. When you stay involved, then you can start looking at prevention. Then you can start looking at systematic how we can work
in
together.
the matters of black people and the law. Throughout history, there has been a negative relationship between black people and the law. What solutions, suggestions, if any, do you have that can help black people overcome, handle, or approach this reality?
I mean, this is nothing new.
Nothing new.
This is a systematic problem. There are individual police officers that are doing their job, and they have a hard job out there, and they are doing good. But there's a difference in the individual police officer and the systematic problem that needs to be addressed. Because now, if you were only seeing, you know, criminals who were shooting a police officer and they were having this problem, that's one thing. But you can almost talk to just about every black male in America, suited up, not doctor, not who have had an encounter, a negative encounter at some point in their life with police officers. I had it years ago when they thought I was a white woman with a black man. We were stopped numerous times. And so that is a problem, and it has to be addressed. It needs to be transparent. The problem, it needs to be transparent of what goes on with the police department, and we need independent investigations. We don't need for them to investigate themselves. That doesn't mean that every time there's something wrong, it's the police officer's problem. But it is a systematic problem, been as far as I can go back.
And so what are your suggestions or your solutions on how, you know, I guess black people as a whole can overcome this systematic problem?
Well, we have to stay involved, and we have to work on keeping it transparent as a group. We have to work on it having an independent investigation. We have to work on it being on the federal level. In the meantime, though, we still have to tell our children that when you stop, I know I had to tell mine when you stop, we have to tell them certain things, how to reach for their lives and how to do this and how to that, because it is a problem that's not resolved yet. But I think that we have to, you know, we have to stay involved and get involved.
Okay. Can you pick, there's some questions in that glass bowl. You can
Let me put my glasses on as I won't know.
Do you need me to read it for you, or you're good?
Nah,
Okay.
I can read it. You can write, I can read. Do you think black people are stupid? Otherwise, why would they kill each other, hurt each other, step on each other? No, I don't think black people are stupid at all. And as far as, you know, as far as killing each other, I mean, that this is on every level. So if we kill each other, and we do, I think that's why we want to clean up as many of the inner cities as we can, so that these kids have another view of life, so they respect, you know, life, so they can feel not hopeless and isolated, but that they can, you know, see, they need to see another side of life. You need the education, they need to get out of the community, they need to do this. But on the other hand, so this is not just killing black people being killed. You got to remember, this is what we see. This is what's in our face. But what we don't see is as much violence in the corporate world, with the wars, with the starving of these communities on the health, with no health, with the when you look at the drug lords, you're looking at that level that no one talks about and no one sees. So you have violence on every level. We want to see our violence help. It's right there. We want to see these kids get given a chance, and it builds up these communities how they get it. But as far as violence, you have it on the other end that you don't see. You have the the sex trafficking. These are not inner city crimes, and you have all these crimes that you don't see. That in nice areas, and there's some of their crimes are committed outside of their areas and even outside of the country. But again, whenever you see poor communities, for whatever reason, South Africa or wherever, you're going to see a lot of illegitimate children being, born. You're going to see high crime. You're going to see it becomes a subculture and a crime, and their role models are like, gang leaders, and so it becomes a culture there. And until we can break, that's why you want that prevention program, until you can break that. If you don't get the kids when they're young, and it's back to cleaning up that community with education, with crime. And it's too bad we can't work with the police, because it would be a very good team effort with the police, with the community, with the churches, with the school systems, working together. Where most of the crimes happen, we like that area. Reconstruct.
Absolutely, I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the programs for the kids. But I was only saying that people look sometimes at that only, but they forget that it's acceptable when you think about all the crime at the top. Mm-hmm. They get quality lawyers. They get out with a pat on the hand, with a little slap, as they call, on the hand, if they get caught at all. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about the warmongers, you're talking about the drug lords, sex trafficking, you're talking about insurance fraud, Wall Street, all of these crimes, you see. But for some reason, we've accepted that. Or it's okay. Mm-hmm. But no crime is okay. But I do have a thing don't just look at us, because people are judging us just by our crimes. Mm-hmm. Black people get judged. We get judged by what other blacks do. We get judged by blacks' poor behaviors. But not the white Americans do not get judged by what other white Americans do.
That's true.
We don't get judged by it. So I just want to, make it clear that no crime is accepted, but do not judge us by, all of us, by these crimes, and think that your crime is okay. Because this destruction of these communities has been going on for years, through the crimes, through real estate, through the crimes, of all kind of housing and education. So, but we do have to address it. That don't mean we don't address our crimes in our community.
Right.
We do want it better, you see.
Good. Can you pick another question?
Oh, I hope I picked one. That was a long question. Often enough, people say that it's the own fault of black people why they are where they are, or the way they are treated. What is your belief, understanding, opinion about that comment? Well, I think you've heard this a lot, and that's what I call from that denial. And when I'm in denial, I blame you for your situation. You see what I'm saying? Same thing with substance abusers. They're in denial of their problem, and it's easier to blame other people.
It's very interesting.
Because if it's our fault, that to say that we are in this situation, that says almost that we are inferior. We are born this way then, obviously, if we like this. And then that means that...
Because the question was, I'm not sure that it was clear with the question. I'm not sure if you read it loud enough, just to make sure.
Well, yeah.
Often enough you hear people say that it is the own fault of black people
Right.
why they are where they are.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Or why they're
that
treated
it is,
the way they're treated.
Right, there.
I just want to make sure the question was heard. But you were saying, but I think that's interesting. We were saying when you're in denial, it's
of
easy
the problem.
then to you blame.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me, there has always been a justification, and I am not defending by any means black crime, white crime, black, brown crime, okay? I'm just saying that we need to all treat it the same,
Right.
okay? But black communities, years and years ago, even before my time, you had black communities that had nothing, no black on black crime. They had some crime, but it wasn't an issue. You understand what I'm saying? They had black education, they had black entrepreneurs. Don't forget, I came in, we had black doctors, black teachers, black lawyers, all in our community. They were bombed and destroyed at that time. So what I am saying, when they had no black on black crime, when they were doing everything, and they had these powerful black communities, they were destroyed. They were destroyed either because they said that a black man had attacked a white woman, or they were destroyed because white Americans were jealous about the blacks being as successful. You had a community that was actually bombed from the skies of America. They own their own communities. So I'm saying there has always been a period, and when you go back to slavery, when people tried to help themselves or even run away, they were considered either mentally ill from wanting to run away from their horrible lives, or they were considered militant, or they were considered as criminals. So I'm just saying, any place you go, there's a justification for racism or putting it on the people that have been the victims of this. Now, I'm not saying we use racism for everything. I talk about personal responsibility. Yes, but on the other hand, to say that this was our condition, we weren't allowed to even move in other communities. We had to just stay within, our certain communities. We had to go to certain schools. So this has a lot to do with psychologically for people, but there's still a disparity of the economics in the workforce. There's still. So I think that's the people that do this are in denial, and I think that's the greater portion, unfortunately, of white America today is denial. We don't see it. I don't see religion. I don't see you walking through. I don't see this.
But even within the black race,
Yeah.
there's black people that.
Well, that's what they are looking at, the same thing everybody else. You even have people from other countries. What do they see? This is the picture that they see currently. You see. And that, again, that's not defending. I think what happens is, after so long, when you have a community that has a lack of education and isolated, when you see this long enough, you're going to see hopelessness, you're going to see rage, and you will see mental illness that no one talks about. I'm talking about that because it's a stigma for us, and we don't reach outside to help ourselves. So you'll see communities that have been beaten down. You'll see that. You'll see where to become a black entrepreneur, I got to get past. I can't get past this feeling of feeling this isolation, and feeling this anger. I can't get past feeling unsafe. I got to get past all these things to even think on another level of a future. A lot of kids are not even thinking of a future. So we can perpetuate certain type of living when we have not had the choices in some of the and we do have to take some responsibility for some things, but for a general, I know blacks say this, if that were true, then you're saying that if this is us, then we are innately born like that, then there is a problem. But I don't see us like that. I just don't see us like that. I think it's a mentality.
You actually have the history and knowledge because you have, two different, or you have a long perspective throughout history of seeing black people.
A lot of age. But I just don't see us as a blanket statement like that, is what I'm saying. And I don't know if I put it well, but I just don't see us as a blanket generalization. I have a problem with that, of a generalization. Because that, you have to be careful with that because people use that not to put education and prevention programs. They use those very things not to better the communities. So the problem is the blanket and generalization. I don't think it's true of us.
Okay, you mentioned you said blacks, and sometimes I hear people say all different kind of things about the name of black people or what we should be called as a race. And I've been in discussions where black people have different views on what they want to be called or who they are and all of that. From history, in your point, what is the name? You got African American, you got black people, you have blacks, you have Negro, colored. What? What
do we call it? That's why we have to be careful sometimes sometimes we can be too defensive and sometimes people don't know what to say. I'm okay. Personally, I'm okay with black or African American. I don't want to be called colored no more. I don't want to be called Negro anymore.
Why?
And
I like Negro.
Oh, I don't. That Negro for me, I'm telling you, when I hit Central High School, I was called everything. I was called coon. I was called nigger. That was the whitest nigga I ever saw. I was called, I was called everything there was.
But what does that have to do with Negro?
Negro, because there was a time during the period of Negro, I know.
When black people were called Negroes.
And to me, black and African American is kind of where we had a choice to say what. They kind of decided.
Who decided?
I think blacks, I'm talking about calling blacks and African American, it was kind of a choice of us.
Where did that come from? Like I'm trying to figure out
but what I'm saying, it was kind of at least it was kind of a choice for us. I don't know if we were asked to be called colored and Negro, and I don't know if we necessarily, but black and African Americans kind of, been a choice. But I learned
that. Was it a choice? I don't know.
I thought it was at least, we had some input as opposed to colored and Negro. But I said, if you want to really know who understands what, it's how they identify. And it's what they're doing to give back to the, and how they fight for injustices. And that's the real identity, whatever you call yourself.
Okay. In your opinion, what do you think black people ought to have a regard for?
I think they have to start having a regard first for themselves in terms of appreciating themselves and loving themselves. I mean, we talk many times about making awareness for white to understand us, and I think we have to love ourselves more, and I think we have to learn our history, no matter how, whether it's taught in school or not. We need to understand what we've come to, how important we are, and how much we've been through, and we have a lot to appreciate at the same time. How we see ourselves in life and in the future. What is our part in life? Not just seeing ourselves in life as a negative, or this person who can't make it. No matter what's out there, we were always brought up, no matter what happens in life, you always tell a person, whether it's sexism or racism, you may have more problems in life, but you don't ever give up and you don't ever stop trying in life. That it's what we do with our life, whether it's 1 year, whether it's 100 years, it's what we do with it. That's really important. And we don't, and that's why we don't let racism, sexism, class, anything stop us. It may slow us down, but we have to keep our children motivated. And we want to keep life interesting and know that there's something outside of the inner city. There's life outside of racism. There's life outside.
What should Black people aim toward?
I think they should always aim toward a better life, education. You obviously see them in education, but I think they should always aim for a better life, even if it's personal. I think you have to look at what the barriers are for you personally as well, as well as an individual, and you want to be able to remove those barriers. Because sometimes we can have the heaviest burdens on ourselves.
What should Black people be intentional about?
And I think they need to be intentional of being involved. I think we talked about that before, in every aspect of their life. Not just their life too, but also others. We don't want to get so focused on just, sometimes it helps when you're giving back too. Mm-hmm. That they want to be able to give back to not just their own personal, do better with their own lives, but also giving back into the community with others. Like, whether it's at church, whether it's in the neighborhood, or our own families. And I would think that would be the number one thing for me, is not only lifting your own awareness and consciousness, but also what you do within your family also. Mm-hmm. Being that role model for your families. We don't need stars to be our role models. Absolutely. We should be the first responders. And
I love that. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and just, I was very enlightened by the conversation, and being able to interview you on the aspects of your autobiography without getting into detail, but knowing in general, why you wrote it and your background. With that being said, what inspires you?
Oh, it's so many. The first thing I think about, I am very family oriented. And in this book, the things I talk about have been personal experiences. And my views, I realize, are my personal views and personal opinions. But I think what inspired me was to leave something. I don't have money to leave them, so I wanted to leave them a story of my life and how I came to the conclusions of, what I did in my life, so that will help them. I think life itself has probably inspired me, even though I was from the segregated South. I remember, despite everything, I still remember having so much fun in life itself. I was always surrounded in my neighborhood by family. I had cousins over here, family over here. I had, a very close-knit family. And I was inspired to learn.
Finish this sentence. Life is
full of experiences and excitement, but it's also experience of pain as well. You got to go through them both. And it's how you come out and who supports you as to how you get through your life, to me.
Okay. How do you define success?
I think individuals have to define their own success. I don't think we can have a blanket statement of success, because some people can be filthy rich and the most unhappiest people in the world. I think to be successful is when you have utilized everything within your power to be wherever you want to get. I mean, wherever you want to grow.
And I think we know this. What is a goal or project you're working on right now?
No, that book. That book.
Autobiography. Okay. And then, lastly, how have you invested in the community or in others?
Through family, friends, and kind of being mentors for family, friends, family, as well as when we were Byron's friends. Many times we took on that surrogate role as parents. And I think mentorship is very important.
Byron is
My son, I'm sorry.
my
Your brother.
brother.
Your brother. But I think we all have to do something, whether it's family, but mentorship, I think, has been probably the one we've done the most. And I think it's so important. Being that mentor for someone to encourage them, you know, that you can make it.
Can you state an affirmation?
I don't let things stop me.
Yeah.
I don't let things stop, not even age.
Awesome. And then last thing, make a declaration.
I declare that I am going to finish my book and my recipe book.
All right.
I declare that.
I love you. Thank you so
You
much
too.
for coming.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. This has been fun.
Thank you for
well,
sharing your experiences.
Thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed this interview. And I really honestly hope, you know, no matter what age, we don't know everything, but I hope that it helps someone, you know,
Yeah,
whatever. Just
Definitely.
help someone. And even if you disagree, but maybe you can take that disagreement and make you think of a solution.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
You know what? I'm thinking, I don't even know what to call you. Well, Miss.
My son did it. Oh, for this, yeah.
Yeah, Miss.
Okay, well, it's up to you. Bye. Jeania, you make a